everyone. My name's Corinne Hyde, and I am recording this video for you today as part of my role in the Online Learning Collective. I am so glad that you are here to join us and to learn about some of the ways that you can engage your students in the classroom while we're all learning to teach online. So, what I would like to show you today is one method of creating a tool that you can use to get student feedback as you are teaching the class. And this allows you to track the responses of each individual student. So, one of the big challenges that we run into in an online synchronous class, meaning a live class session, is that um, it's very easy to just kind of default to lecture where you're talking at your students and they're sitting there supposedly listening, but they also have the entire internet there to distract them. And so, how do you know? Are they actually engaged and paying attention, or are they zoning out? So, one of the ways that you can help to keep your students accountable, keep them engaged in the class session, is to frequently intersperse interactive tasks into your class session. Now, there are a lot of different ways to do this. One way that I really like to do this is to use Google Forms as a way to collect individual responses from students that I can then review later. And this allows me to figure out where the misconceptions are, to figure out where strengths are in terms of student understanding, to see, who's really engaged and who's with us, and who maybe is not fully present. Now, I say this though with a word of caution, which is that I think it is really important, especially given what we're going through right now with the pandemic, that we don't look for opportunities to be punitive with our students. So I personally don't try to, go after individual students and say, well, you know, you got this answer wrong that I asked during class, or it looked like you weren't paying attention for 5 minutes there, because I understand that everybody's going to have those moments, right? Especially during a global pandemic. So I would err on the side of being more compassionate. With that said, though, I understand that we want to make sure that students are engaged and we want to know what they're thinking. So this is a particularly useful way to do that, especially if you have more students than you can reasonably talk to in a given class session. So my class sessions are fairly small, so I can do a lot of individual discussion and small group stuff, and I generally get a pretty good idea of what people are thinking and if they're engaged or not. Now, as you start to get larger and larger classes, or if you have, subject matter where you're not entirely sure everybody's participating, or maybe it's stuff that people don't necessarily feel comfortable talking about out loud, this is one way that you can try to address that. So what I'm going to do is I am going to open up Google Forms. So I'm just going to type forms dot, and it autofills for me, .google.com. And I'm going to go on here to Google Forms, and you're going to see I use a lot of exit tickets as a way of getting people's feedback. But here is how you can actually create a tool that your students can use during class to respond to your prompts or your questions and to see if they are engaged. So you go into Google Forms and you hit that create button, that little plus sign, and then you can call your Google form whatever you want it to be. So maybe my Google form is going to be called something like opening question March. Oh, I swear I can type March 24th. 2020. Okay, now if I want to describe, give a description to this, then I can. Otherwise, what I can do is I can type my question here. So maybe my question is something like, do you think current K-12 schools embrace sociocultural theory in practice? If so, how? If not, why not? Now, not perfect question design, but let's just say this is what I'm going to go with. So you'll notice that as I type this, Google Forms senses what I'm asking here. So it sees these keywords like how, okay, and why not. And what it does is it automatically selects a question type for me. So over here on the right, you'll see that there's a drop-down box with a bunch of different question types. So paragraph is what it automatically selected for me. That happens to be what I was going to choose anyway. So I go ahead and choose that, and then this is where my students will be able to answer. I'm going to make this a required question. And I can either add another question onto this if I would like by clicking this plus sign. Maybe I have two questions I want to ask students. Or I can just hit that trash button. I'll just leave this as one question. Now, up here in the top right, you're going to see that I have some options. So I can change my theme. I don't really care about that right now. I can preview what this will look like for students. I can change my settings. And then also up here on the left, I can change the title of my form. Because I typed this title over here first, I can actually just click up here and it will automatically pop my title up there for me. Now I'm going to change my settings. If I go up to the top right, okay, what I'm going to do so that I know who is responding to this question is I am going to choose to collect email addresses. Okay, that will let me know who's responding. And I'm going to instruct my students because this is I am using my University of Southern California Google Suite right now. So I'm going to restrict it to users within the organization because what that will do is it will require my students to sign in to Google with their own G Suite account, and that helps me keep track of who's responding essentially. So that way I know, okay, it's only the people in USC that are responding, and it's only these students with these email addresses that responded. And so that way I can keep track of who responded. I'm not going to do response receipts. If you mouse over, it will tell you what these things are. It just lets the students get a copy. If this was a more high stakes thing, then I would enable response receipts so that way students can prove like, yes, I did answer this. I'm limiting my students to one response. I don't want them to go through and respond to this multiple times. I don't want them to be able to edit after submit because if I'm doing this in a live class session, that can get a little tricky. I don't want them to be going back 5 minutes later and saying, oh, I forgot what I was going to say, or oh, now the instructor said the answer, so I'm going to go back and edit what my response was. So I'm not going to check edit after submit, and I don't want them to see the summary charts and text responses for this particular answer. That's something that can be very useful sometimes, but for this answer or for this question, I don't want them to see that. Now I can go to presentation. If I have multiple questions, it's very useful to check show progress bar. That just lets the student see how many questions they still have to respond to if it's on different pages. But this is just one question, so I don't need to do that. And I don't need to shuffle question order here because I'm actually just doing one question at a time that I want them to respond to. So I don't have a bunch of questions. I can change the confirmation message if I like, but I don't have to do that. And then quizzes. Now, if I want to, I could make this a quiz. I am not going to make this a quiz because this is just to help me understand how my instruction is going during the class session and who's engaged and who's not. So I don't want this to be a quiz. I don't want to assign points for this or anything like that. So I am not going to make this a quiz. All right, so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click save. All right, now, before I send out or before I grab the link to be able to send this to students, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to hit preview because I want to make sure that this looks the way I want it to look. So I hit preview and it is going to show me exactly what students will see. Okay, this is what the students would see when they visit my link. Opening question, March 24th, 2020. It's going to remind them that their email address will be recorded when they submit this form. Okay, so if they are signed into a wrong account or something like that, this is their opportunity to change that. If they are not signed into their university email address because of the way I set up my settings, then it won't even let them see the poll. If I didn't check that, then it wouldn't matter how they're signed in. They could just access the poll, but then I wouldn't know whose response was whose. here's my question. My students can type their answers here, test, 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 and then they hit submit. Says their response has been recorded. Now, if I go back up here on this tab to my actual question, I can see responses right here. And you will see, okay, who's responded? I responded. Here was my response. This is the summary. So you would see a list of everybody. I can go by question. This would show me all the responses. Or I could go by individual and I could see, okay, what did chi@usc.edu say? Oh, okay, well, this is what they said in response to this question. Now, I'm going to come back up here. Oh, and you can also view this as a spreadsheet if you would like, if that's useful to you. And when you're done accepting responses, you can turn the responses off if you don't want students to go back and enter responses later. So if I go back to questions here, what I would do now with this is I'm going to come up here in the top right where it says send. And I would click send. It's going to collect their email address. And I don't want to send it via email, okay? I actually want to put it into a Google Slides presentation. So I'm going to click this link right here because I want to get the link to this question. I'm going to hit shorten URL because I don't want to deal with all that long URL. And then I'm just going to hit copy. Okay, so now that this has been copied, what I can do is I can go to my drive and I can go to my random presentation that I have created here. This is my little sample presentation that I made the other day. And let's say I want students to answer this. Okay, I created a slide. Please, and oops, and oh my gosh, I swear I can type the following question. And now I'm just going to pop the link in. Now you can get fancy with it if you want, and you can, change the name of this, but for right now, this is where we're going to go. When I go to present my presentation for my students, this is what I will ask them to do. I will say, okay, on the Google slide, I would like you to visit this link. And if they have the Google Slides open, they can just click on it. If not, I can paste this link in the chat, and they can go ahead and fill this out. Now, another little trick here that I would recommend is I'm going to have my students fill this out, right? And I'm going to be screen sharing my presentation when I do that. So if my students don't have this open at the same time, meaning that they can't click on it, they won't be able to click on that link in my screen share, what I do is I pop the link down here in the speaker notes, and that way when I go to present, check out what happens. If I go up here where it says present, I'm not going to click present, I'm going to go to the little arrow next to it, and then I'm going to click presenter view. Okay, now check it out. I've got my actual presentation over here, okay? But I also have this additional window that's kind of hiding back here now. I have this window, and this window now has my notes. And look at that. This is now something I can copy paste, or I can click on. And I can, what I would do if I was actually teaching this class via Zoom is I would say, okay, I want everybody to fill out this Google form. And then I would just copy paste this and pop it in the chat for anybody who doesn't happen to have the, the Google Slides open. Have my students take, 5 minutes to fill out that question, and then we move forward. I can intersperse as many of these questions as I want in there, and it's going to keep track for me of, okay, who is it that has responded? Now, let's say, though, that you don't have an organizational G Suite account. You don't know whose email addresses are whose, and that's going to be a whole big pain in the rear end. Okay, so we don't want to track this by email address then. So let's do this instead. We have our question, and I'm going to hit add question. And what I'm just going to put right here is name. And it automatically changes it for me to short answer. I'm going to make it required. Okay, and now if I go up here to preview, now look what you'll see. Oops, hold on. I already responded to my inform, so I have to uncheck this real quick so that we can see it. close these, and let's preview now. Okay, so now look, it says name. All right, and now I would have to put my name in. My name is Corinne Hyde. Okay, testing 1, 2, 3. Oh, 3. And then I hit submit. Okay, now my response has been recorded. Go back to my question. Look, now I have 2 responses. My original response that I did before, and because I added name after I did that first response, it shows that it's blank and I didn't respond. But if I click forward to the next response, look at that. Name, Corinne Hyde, and then my response to the question here. I can do it by question. You can see the responses. Or I can do a summary. I can see here's the emails of people who responded, here's the names of people who responded, and here is their responses, or here are their responses. So this is a really, really powerful tool if you want to know who is responding. Now, if you don't want to know who's responding and you just want kind of a general read of the room, then other things like Poll Everywhere might be easier for you because we can embed that directly in the presentation, and it makes things a little bit more streamlined. But if you do need to track who's responding to which item, this is a great way to do it. I would encourage kind of a blend of different question types if you're going to do a Google form like this. It doesn't always have to be a paragraph type response. Maybe sometimes you just ask a quick multiple choice question or whatever the case may be. You can also use some built-in stuff in Zoom to do this, but because not everyone's on Zoom, I wanted to share with you a way that you can do this that is applicable regardless of which platform you happen to be using for a live class session. So this is one way that you can do that. I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions at all about what you saw, if there are additional things that you would like to see, please don't hesitate to let me know. You can tell me that in the comments, either on the YouTube video or on our site or on Facebook post. And I hope to see you in future tutorials. So good luck, stay safe, take care of each other. Bye everyone.